The letter arrived on a Tuesday, not a phone call. Not a certified notice with a return address and a stamp that made your stomach drop before you opened it. Just a standard white envelope from a credit monitoring service I had signed up for 3 years earlier, mostly as an afterthought, the kind of low-cost subscription you set up after reading a news article about identity theft, and then mostly forget about. I was at my kitchen table in Clarksville, Tennessee. 6:22 in the morning, black coffee going cold beside a half-finished crossword. The ceiling fan was clicking once every full rotation, a small mechanical hiccup I'd been meaning to fix for 2 winters, and never had. I opened the envelope the way I open everything. Clean tear along the top seam, 1 fold, flat on the table. Alert. Your credit score has decreased by 210 points. I read it once. Set it down. Picked up the coffee. Set that down too. 210 points. I had spent 22 years in the Air Force training myself not to react before I understood. That discipline doesn't dissolve on retirement day. It's not a skill, it becomes a posture. A way your nervous system has learned to hold information before your body decides what to do with it. I sat with that number the way you sit with a miscount in a logistics manifest. Not panicking, just locating the error. I hadn't opened a new credit account. I hadn't taken on any debt. I hadn't co-signed anything in 2 years, not since I'd added my signature to Calvin's mortgage pre-approval paperwork as a reference point. I'd been paying every bill on time, living on my Air Force pension, spending less than I earned, the way I always had. 210 points don't vanish on their own. I pulled a legal pad from the drawer beneath the table, wrote the date at the top in block letters, November 14th. Below it, 2 things. $0 spent. 210 points gone. That was the beginning. Not the rage, I want to be clear about that. Because the rage is what people assume comes first. Not the grief, and not the disbelief. Just the number. Sitting there on a yellow legal pad at 6:22 in the morning while the ceiling fan clicked. And the kind of stillness that comes when you have spent 22 years reading data that doesn't add up, and you know with the cold. Particular certainty of someone who has been trained in exactly this, that something happened while you weren't looking. I didn't call Calvin that morning. I went and got my reading glasses, opened my laptop, and pulled up every account I had access to. I was counting, not angry, not afraid, counting. My name is Darlene Coates. I'm 61 years old. I live alone in a 2-bedroom house in Clarksville, Tennessee. The smaller one I bought after I sold the family place when Calvin moved out at 28. I keep a vegetable garden out back that I am better at neglecting than maintaining, and I drive a 2017 Ford F-150. I paid for outright, no financing, no co-signer, no monthly reminder of anyone else's decision. I retired from the United States Air Force in 2016. Captain. Intelligence analysis, 22 years. My final posting was Langley Air Force Base, signals and pattern work, the kind of job that requires you to sit with large amounts of contradictory information for longer than most people are comfortable with, and find the thing that doesn't belong. I was good at it. Good enough that I was offered a civilian contractor role when I separated, which I declined. Before Langley, Ramstein, Yokota, Kandahar, twice. I was the person in the room who read the data nobody else wanted to sit with long enough to understand. I became comfortable with numbers that told bad news, with timelines that revealed things people preferred to leave unrevealed. I retired early, not by choice. A training injury in 2015 left me with 2 compressed discs and a spinal fusion that changed the math on continued service. I spent 8 months in inpatient rehabilitation at Walter Reed. That medical history is relevant. I'll return to it. Calvin was 33 years old when I retired. He was living in Nashville by then, working in commercial real estate marketing, the kind of position that sounds more impressive at dinner parties than it looks on a pay stub. He was charming in the specific way that performs well in sales. Warm, quick with a story, comfortable in rooms full of strangers. He had his father's ease and a version of my organizational thinking, though he had never been willing to apply it with any discipline. I loved my son. I want to say that plainly, up front, before anything else, so it doesn't get buried under what comes next. I loved Calvin. I still do, in the specific and complicated way you love someone who has shown you exactly who they are when they believed you weren't watching. I also knew him. I had known him for 35 years. I knew how he operated when he wanted something from me. Patiently, confidently, with the ease of someone who had never once been told no, and fully believed he never would be. He had never had a reason to believe otherwise. What he didn't know, what he had not factored into any of his calculations, was this. I notice things that don't match. It's not a choice anymore. It's wiring. 22 years of signals work doesn't leave your nervous system when you leave the service. You keep seeing the patterns. You keep flagging the discrepancies. You keep looking for the thing that shouldn't be there. November 14th, 6:22 in the morning, 210 points. I had noticed, and I said nothing. I was counting. It started 2 years before the letter. Or rather, that's when I first said yes to something I should have asked more questions about. Calvin called me in September 2021. His voice was easy, the relaxed, unhurried tone he used when he had already decided the answer would be yes, and was calling as a formality. He and his girlfriend Priya had found a house in East Nashville, a 3-bedroom Craftsman near Shelby Park, and the mortgage broker had suggested that adding a co-signer with strong credit and stable pension income would lock in a more favorable rate. It would be mostly administrative, Calvin said. Just a reference point. My signature on 2 documents, no real financial liability, nothing ongoing. I should have called the broker directly. I should have read every page myself and asked a real estate attorney to walk me through the language. I know that now with the clarity that only comes after the fact. Instead, I trusted Calvin's summary of what administrative meant. I signed. 3 weeks later, the paperwork was filed, the mortgage approved. Calvin and Priya moved into 4,412 Shelby Park Drive. I sent a housewarming gift, a set of cast-iron pans, and an envelope with a check for $500. Calvin called to say thank you, his voice warm in the way it always was after he had gotten what he came for. After that, I didn't hear from him much. That wasn't unusual. Calvin had operated on a specific cycle since his mid-20s. Intense, warm contact when he needed something, relative silence once the need was satisfied. I had long since stopped reading the silence as rejection. I had learned to read it the way I read gaps in a transmission, not as absence, but as data. What I didn't know was that somewhere inside the documents I had trusted Calvin to summarize correctly, he had obtained something broader than a reference signature. He had obtained access. The first account opened on the 9th of March, 2022. A credit line through an online fintech lender I had never heard of. $48,000. The money went toward a vehicle, a black Audi Q7, registered to Priya, insured at their Nashville address. A minimum payment had been quietly running every month since then, drawn from a holding account I had no visibility into. I didn't know. Nothing appeared anywhere I was looking. The second account opened 11 months later, the 14th of February, 2023. Valentine's Day, I noticed later, with a coldness I couldn't quite articulate. A home equity line of credit through a regional bank I had never done business with. $71,500. The draw was used over the following 4 months. Custom kitchen cabinetry, a primary bathroom addition, new hardwood flooring throughout. I've seen the contractor invoices now, itemized and detailed. They upgraded every room in a house they were living in on someone else's credit. That February, the same month, Calvin drew $68,900 for the kitchen renovation. I replaced the water heater in my 2-bedroom house in Clarksville. $847, paid in cash. I noted it in the spreadsheet I'd maintained since 2004. February 14th, $847. Water heater. A single line among 12 years of single lines. He was installing custom cabinetry on my credit. I was writing down $847 in a column. That is the whole story, really. Everything else is just documentation. The third account opened the 3rd of August 2023. A a cryptocurrency investment platform, $43,500. Moved into speculative positions that lost 40% of their value within 60 days. 3 accounts, 26 months. $48,000. March 2022. $71,500. February 2023. $43,500. August 2023. $163,000. My name on every application. My credit history as the foundation. My 22 years of financial discipline as the infrastructure Calvin had decided to run his life on without telling me. He had borrowed my name the way you borrow a tool from someone who lives far enough away that they won't notice it's missing. He had calculated, and he was not wrong about this, for 26 months, that I trusted him enough not to verify. That my love had no audit function. What Calvin had never once asked himself was what would happen when the numbers stopped matching. He didn't know about the legal pad. The Sunday evening budget reviews, the spreadsheet I'd maintained since 2004, the 22 years of reading data with the specific patience of someone trained to wait for the thing that doesn't belong. He had never asked himself that question. That was the first mistake he made. Have you ever trusted someone completely, signed something, lent your name, said yes because the relationship felt like reason enough, and then discovered, later, that the trust was exactly what they were counting on? Tell me in the comments below. And if you believe that love and liability are not the same thing, that loyalty should never cost you your name, subscribe to this channel. New stories every day at 12:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. I pulled my full credit report at 7:04 a.m. on November 14th. I use the word full deliberately, not the summary score. The complete trade line report, account origination, dates, inquiry history, current balances, payment status, every open and closed account associated with my social security number. The kind of document most people never read past the first page. I read all 43 pages. The first account appeared on page 7, the 9th of March, 2022. Fintech Auto Lender. Credit line, $48,000. Current balance, $44,230. Payment status, current. Account holder, Darlene M. Coates. I set down my coffee. The second account appeared on page 11, the 14th of February, 2023. A regional bank. Home equity line, $71,500. Balance drawn, $68,900. Status, current. The third appeared on page 19, the 3rd of August, 2023. Cryptocurrency investment platform, $43,500. Remaining balance after losses, $39,100. I sat for a moment. The ceiling fan clicked. The crossword was still open beside my elbow. 3 accounts. $163,000. My name, my credit history, my signature, or what had been filed as my signature. At 8:30 a.m., I called Paulette Marsh. Paulette was a retired Air Force Chief Warrant Officer I had worked alongside at Kandahar. She now ran a private financial forensics practice in Alexandria, Virginia. She was precise, unhurried, and one of 4 people in the world I would call with something like this. I didn't explain everything on the phone. I said, I need help tracing account origination. I think someone used my identity. She said, send me what you have by end of day. I sent everything. Then I went to my kitchen table and kept building. At 1:17 a.m., the ceiling fan still clicking, the coffee long cold, the crossword set aside. I was in front of my laptop in the dark. I had opened a new folder on my desktop. Plain label, no drama. I named it November. Paulette called me the following morning with her initial findings. The IP address on all 3 online applications, the FinTech Lenders Portal, the bank's digital form, the crypto platform's sign-up system, had been traced to a single residential address, 4412 Shelby Park Drive, Nashville, Tennessee. Calvin's address. My son had applied for $163,000 in credit under my name from his living room, from the house with the custom cabinetry he had renovated on that same credit, from the room where, 2 months from now, he would stand in front of 22 guests and call it home. Paulette's voice was even on the phone. She'd delivered bad news before. She said, "Darlene, you understand what this is?" "Yes," I said. "Wire fraud, identity theft, federal jurisdiction." "I know." A pause. "Do you want time to think?" I looked at the legal pad. November 14th. 210 points. The number I had written 4 days ago in block letters while the coffee went cold. "No," I said. "I want to build the file. Counting. Not anger, not grief, not yet. Counting." The folder grew the way good evidence always grows slowly, without urgency, one verified fact at a time. Paulette handled the financial forensics. She pulled account origination trails from all 3 lenders, cross-referencing the IP addresses against residential registry records. She obtained the device fingerprints from the FinTech lender's application portal, a specific MacBook Pro model, registered to a Calvin Coates at a Nashville address. She pulled the access logs from the bank's digital system. 3 applications, 3 dates, 1 residential IP, 1 device, 1 name that was not Calvin Coates. Paulette found 1 more detail in the application logs. The notification email address listed on all 3 accounts, the address that received the approval confirmations, the welcome letters. The monthly statements for 26 months was a Gmail account registered to Priya Kapoor, not Calvin, Priya. She hadn't just benefited from the accounts, she'd been reading the mail. I handled the medical records myself. This was the piece Calvin had not accounted for, the piece that transformed a civil matter into a federal one. 2 of the 3 accounts had been opened during periods when I was receiving inpatient treatment at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. The auto loan opened the 9th of March, 2022. My Vanderbilt admission records show I was in post-operative care from March 7th through March 19th, a second spinal procedure, the complication from the 2015 fusion that had been building for years. I was not at home. I was not near a laptop or a phone. I was in a hospital bed with a drainage tube and a specific kind of exhaustion that makes a person very still and very focused on small, immediate things. The crypto platform application, the 3rd of August, 2023. I was in outpatient recovery at the same facility for a nerve block procedure. Documented, time-stamped, signed by 3 attending physicians. Calvin had opened 2 credit lines in my name while I was receiving medical treatment. The applications listed my home address as the point of access. The medical records put me 40 miles away. I printed the admission records. I printed the application timestamps. I placed them side by side in a clear sleeve and filed them at page 39 of the binder we were building. I bought the binder at CVS on a Thursday afternoon. Black, 1-inch spine, 40-cent pocket dividers, $3.49 total. I paid cash and didn't save the receipt, the only thing in the last 2 years I hadn't documented. Some things you just carry yourself. The binder grew to 67 pages. Page 1. Credit report, November 14th. Annotated in red ink. Pages 2 through 14. Account origination documentation. All 3 accounts. Pages 15 through 31. IP address trace reports, certified by Paulette's firm. Pages 32 through 38. Device fingerprint analysis. Pages 39 through 52. Medical records, Vanderbilt, cross-referenced by date against application timestamps. Pages 53 through 60. Bank statements showing minimum payment transfers from the holding account. Pages 61 through 67. Summary memo by Paulette Marsh, CWO, retired, citing applicable federal statutes. When Paulette and I finished the final review by phone, she was quiet for a long moment. Not the quiet of someone who doesn't know what to say. Paulette always knew what to say. It was the quiet of someone reading the full picture for the first time. The way you step back from a map after you've been tracing one route and suddenly see the whole terrain. Then she said, "He didn't steal from you because he needed the money. Darlene. He did it because he decided your name was a resource he was entitled to use. She said it the way she used to call out targeting errors in Kandahar Flat, without drama, the kind of certainty that doesn't need emphasis, because the facts are already doing the work. I didn't respond immediately. I wrote it down on the legal pad, not because I needed to remember it, because it was the clearest thing anyone had said to me in 26 months. Then I closed the legal pad, set it beside the binder on the kitchen table, and went outside. The week before I drove to the FBI field office, I went out to the garden on a Thursday evening. The tomatoes had mostly died back by then November in Tennessee, past their season, but the soil needed turning before the ground froze, and I'd been putting it off since September. I turned the soil for 40 minutes without thinking about anything in particular. The black binder was inside on the kitchen table. The coffee was on. The ceiling fan was clicking. Out here there was just the sound of the spade going in and turning over, going in and turning over. At some point I noticed I hadn't thought about Calvin for almost an hour. That was the first time in 5 weeks. I went back inside, washed my hands at the kitchen sink, and poured the coffee. I contacted the FBI field office in Nashville on December 3rd. Special Agent Torres took my preliminary report by phone, reviewed Paulette's summary memo, and asked me to bring the full binder to the field office the following week. I drove it there in my F-150, carried it inside in a cloth bag with a zipper. Before I left the house, I set it on my kitchen scale. 340 grams, 67 pages. 26 months of my name used without my knowledge. Agent Torres spent 40 minutes reviewing the file in silence. Then she looked up. "Miss Coates," she said, "when would be a good time to make contact with your son?" I said, "I'll tell you." Calvin's housewarming party was scheduled for December 19th. He had sent the invitation in early November, a digital card, warm font, a photograph of the newly renovated Craftsman exterior. "Come celebrate. Finally feels like home." I confirmed my attendance on November 16th, 2 days after I found the credit report. Before Calvin knew I had found anything at all, I RSVP'd with a simple reply. Wouldn't miss it. I spent the weeks between living in my ordinary rhythm. Sunday evening budget review. Tuesday in the garden. The tomatoes long past season, but the soil already turned. Thursday call with my sister Ruth, who knew nothing and whom I kept it that way. I went to bed at a reasonable hour. I woke early. I did not call Calvin. He called me once, the first week of December, to confirm I was coming. His voice was easy, unhurried. The voice of a man who believed he had constructed something that couldn't be seen. "Of course," I said. "I'll be there." I arrived at 4412 Shelby Park Drive at 6:47 p.m. on December 19th. I parked on the street. I carried a bottle of wine as the hostess gift and the cloth bag beneath my arm. Inside the bag, the black binder, 67 pages, $3.49 at CVS, 340 grams of 26 months. Priya answered the door. She was in a green wrap dress, heeled boots, hair done the specific brightness of someone who has worked very hard to make a space look effortless. She kissed my cheek. "Darlene, you look wonderful." The house was warm and loud and smelled like catered food and recently finished wood. I looked at the kitchen when I entered. The custom cabinetry, white, floor to ceiling, exactly the material that costs what it looks like it costs. I looked at the floors, quarter sawn oak, real hardwood, not laminate, the kind of renovation detail that tells you someone either had money or borrowed someone else's. I knew which one this was. Calvin found me near the kitchen threshold. He hugged me the way he always had, one arm, brief, confident. He was in a navy blazer, glass of wine in his hand, comfortable in the house with the ease of a man who believed he had earned it. "Glad you're here, Mom," he said. "Me too," I said. I waited. The evening moved through its paces. Drinks circulated, the catered appetizers made their rounds, conversations formed in clusters near the fireplace. Calvin's co-workers, Priya's family, my sister Ruth and my cousin Diane in the far corner, talking to a man I didn't recognize. 22 people in a house built on $163,000 borrowed in my name. I held my wine glass and spoke when spoken to and kept the cloth bag close. At 8:15 p.m., Calvin tapped his glass with a fork and called for attention. The room settled. He thanked everyone for coming. He talked about how much work the renovation had taken, the planning, the contractors, the months of living through construction. He put his arm around Priya. He said, "This place finally feels like what we always imagined." Applause. Someone near the fireplace raised their glass. Priya's mother said something warm and quiet that made Priya laugh. The room eased back into itself. I set down my wine glass. I reached into the cloth bag. Calvin. He turned. The smile still on easy. Warm. The smile I had known for 35 years. I placed the black binder on the kitchen island, the one with the white quartz countertop installed on my home equity credit line. The binder landed with a flat, definite sound, the sound of 340 grams meeting stone, and the room didn't understand what it was yet. I opened it to page 39. "Your home address," I said. "The 9th of March 2022. My name. My social security number. The medical records show I was in post-operative care at Vanderbilt that day." Nobody moved. Calvin's smile held for exactly 2 more seconds, the lag between the brain receiving information and the body deciding what to do with it. Then it fell. "Mom, page 53, I said. "The holding account. 3 minimum payments, 26 months, drawn to keep the accounts from defaulting while you waited." Priya had gone very still beside the catered platter. Her mother, 3 feet away, looked between Priya and the binder and back again. The way you look at something when you realize the story you've been told was a different story entirely. Ruth, across the room, had set down her drink. $163,000, I said. 3 accounts. My name. The room was completely quiet. Somewhere near the back, one of Calvin's coworkers set down their glass on the mantel with a careful, deliberate sound. That was the only sound for a long moment, that single glass, placed with the specific care of someone who suddenly needs to do something with their hands. I looked at my son. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment. Not satisfaction. Not release. Not the particular warmth that people call closure. What I felt was the specific stillness of a person who has been carrying 67 pages for 5 weeks and has finally put them down somewhere solid. "The FBI already has the file," I said. "Agent Torres will be in contact in January." I picked up my wine glass. I finished the last inch of it. I set it down on the kitchen island beside the black binder, the $3.49 binder that had just done more work than any conversation I could have had. I picked up my coat from the hook by the door. I left the house at 8:23 p.m. The hardwood floors were beautiful on the way out. The federal investigation moved the way federal investigations move thoroughly, without urgency, without drama, on a timeline that belongs to the evidence and not to anyone's emotional schedule. Agent Torres contacted Calvin the first week of January. Priya retained separate counsel by January 15th, a detail that told me everything about how that conversation had gone between them. The Nashville DA's office accepted the federal referral in February, both names on separate charging documents, 3 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of identity theft. The Audi the Q7 purchased on the March 2022 credit line was repossessed in March. The house at 4412 Shelby Park Drive was listed for sale in April, after the civil judgment froze Calvin's assets pending restitution determination. The cryptocurrency positions had already lost 60% of their remaining value. What had been $43,500 borrowed in my name was worth approximately $17,000 when the accounts were frozen. The court ordered restitution, $163,000 plus legal fees and investigative costs. Total judgment, $189,400. The house sold in June, $487,000 sale price. After the judgment, the outstanding mortgage balance, and legal costs, Calvin netted $4,000 $200. He had spent 26 months building a life on $163,000 borrowed in my name, and came out with less than I spent on my water heater that February. The math, as it always does, told the truth. My credit score was restored to its correct number by June. I opened a new savings account in August, my name only, my pension only, my discipline, and moved my emergency fund into it. I closed every account that had carried even a thread of joint access. The black binder is with the FBI now. I don't have a copy. I don't need one. It did what it was built to do, and I let it go. I spent 22 years being the person who kept the record straight, the one who read all 43 pages when everyone else stopped at the summary, the one who sat with data that told bad news long enough to understand it. I spent 35 years being someone's mother. Those two things are not incompatible. But I understand now clearly, finally, without ambivalence, that keeping someone's record straight is not the same as absorbing their consequences. I am not Calvin's emergency fund. I am not the invisible name on the paperwork. I am not the resource that runs quietly in the background of someone else's life until it runs dry. I am Darlene Coates, captain, retired. I keep my own accounts, and I check them. It was a Tuesday morning when I finally fixed the ceiling fan, 6 months after the judgment. 6 months after the hardwood floors, the Audi, the $4,200. I stood on a step stool in my kitchen in Clarksville and tightened the single loose screw I had been meaning to fix for 2 winters. The clicking stopped. The fan turned clean and quiet for the first time in as long as I could remember. The coffee was hot. The crossword from that morning was finished, sitting beside the empty mug. On the legal pad next to it, one number at the top, written in block letters. $189,400. Below it, one word. Paid. Not by me. I went outside to check on the tomatoes. They were coming back in. Maybe you know what it feels like to be someone's silent infrastructure. Not the person they call to celebrate. The person they call when the numbers don't work. The one whose name appears on the paperwork but not in the photograph. The one who makes things possible while someone else makes things visible. Maybe you have spent years in that position for a child, a sibling, a spouse, a parent, and told yourself that this is what love looks like in practice. That love is often invisible. That the people who do the quiet work, the unglamorous work, the work that holds the structure up, that those people have a particular kind of dignity. And they do. I believe that. What I also know now is this. There is a difference between love that costs you something and love that costs you everything. The first is devotion. The second is a liability you did not consent to carry. Calvin did not steal from me because he was in crisis. He was not facing a medical emergency, a foreclosure, the kind of catastrophe that makes people do things they otherwise wouldn't, and later, genuinely, cannot explain. He was buying cabinetry. He was speculating on cryptocurrency. He was building a life that looked comfortable and calling it earned. He did it because he had done the math on what I would check. He calculated, and for 26 months he was correct that I trusted him enough not to look. That my love had no audit function. That the name I had spent 61 years building meant less to me, as a practical matter, than preserving my relationship with him. He was wrong about the last part, but I want to be honest about something, because honesty is the whole point of telling this story. He was not entirely wrong about what he had observed. I had spent years absorbing Calvin's needs without asking hard questions, because asking hard questions felt like the opposite of what a mother was supposed to do. I had told myself that trust was a form of generosity, that not checking was a form of faith. What it was, in practice, was an open door. Your trust can be borrowed against. Your predictability is a known quantity to people who want to exploit it. Not because they hate you, Calvin did not hate me, but because they have done the math on what you will and will not verify, and they have concluded, based on all available evidence, that they are safe. If you are the reliable one, the one whose name goes on things, whose credit holds things up, whose signature gets offered as a reference point, I am speaking to you directly now. Read everything before you sign it. Not a summary, not someone else's explanation of what the document means. The document itself, every page. Call the lender yourself. Call the attorney yourself. If someone tells you it's mostly administrative, that is precisely when you read most carefully. You are allowed to say, I need to read this before I sign it. You are allowed to say, I want independent legal review. You are allowed to say, no. That word is available to you even with family, especially with family. A relationship that cannot survive your refusal to sign something you don't understand was never built on the foundation you thought it was. What you cannot recover easily is a credit history that has been borrowed without your knowledge. What you cannot recover easily is 26 months of someone else's decisions running on your name, your number, your record. The financial system does not distinguish between fraud and consent once the signature is on the file. That is the practical reality. You have to be the one who distinguishes. You have to be the one who reads all 43 pages. I loved Calvin through his childhood and his 20s and his choices and his silences. I love him still, in the specific and complicated way you love someone who has shown you who they are when they believed you weren't watching. But love is not the same as underwriting. Love does not require you to keep your name on someone else's liability to spare them from their own. And the clearest thing I have learned, the thing I will take with me from all of this, is that protecting someone from consequences is not the same as protecting them. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do for the people you love is let the numbers tell the truth. She didn't get angry. She got 67 pages. And when those pages were ready, when the timestamps matched and the IP addresses mapped and the medical records said what they said, she put them on the kitchen island of the house her son had renovated on her credit, in front of the 22 people he'd invited to celebrate it, and she walked out into the cold December night and drove herself home in a truck she had paid for in full. She fixed the ceiling fan in June. She slept through the night. The house at 4,412 Shelby Park Drive had a new family in it by then. My son had built it on my name. I took my name back. Everything else followed. If this story meant something to you, I hope you'll share it with someone who may need this reminder today.